You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions, episode 110. And now, here are Jeff and Ian.
Again, everybody, welcome to the Tricorder Transmissions coverage of Gold Key Comics, issue number 22, Siege in Superspace. I am your host, Jeff Hewlett, and with me once again is my co-chair for the Gold Key series, Mr. Ian Adams. How are you today, Ian?
Doing great. How about you?
Awesome. So glad to have you back with us, and here to talk about another exciting Gold Key issue. Strangely enough, in the past, Gold Key seemed to have the same writer consistently for at least a handful of issues. The last issue, issue 21, brought in a new writer who was there only for that one issue. And here we are changing writers yet again. So this is a little bit of a break in format for Gold Key. This time we
still
have...
the same artist, though. Yes,
they still have Alberto, which is great because his art has been getting consistently better. But we have a new writer by the name of George... I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. George Boudreau. I could be off there.
I thought it was Jerry Boudreau.
Yeah, well, it's George Jerry Boudreau. His actual legal name was George, but he goes by Jerry. So
look at you doing research.
I'm telling you, I'm good for something. So he's got quite a history prior to Gold Key. He's not primarily a sci-fi writer. He wrote mostly horror and war comics for a lot of different publishers, including Western Publishing, which Gold Key was a subsidiary of. He was working mostly in the 50s through the early 80s. He also worked with Marvel and DC Comics. In the 70s, he did a few issues of Star Trek Tectennial News, and the relaunched version of Inside Star Trek from Lincoln Enterprises. He also contributed to 2 issues of Gold Key, Siege in Superspace and Child's Play, which is coming up later. In addition, he worked a lot with Vampirella. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that, and Eerie. And some other titles were Star Spangled War Stories, G.I. Combat, and Mighty Samson. So he's been around the comics block for a while, but his first foray into writing for Star Trek.
That writing style, just like the last writer in issue 21, this writer definitely has that kind of, he fits right in that whole kind of pulp feel.
Yes, definitely. This one may be a little more pulpy, though, than the Mummy one, in my mind. But interesting story nonetheless, so I'm looking forward to getting into this in a minute. Of course, we mentioned already that the artist is once again Alberto Giolitti, who's been our artist for quite a while on Gold Key. So, as again I said, his art has been getting better. Ian and I talked extensively about the quality of the artwork in the previous issue, and I think that this one holds up very well.
Agreed.
Although this was published quite a while later. This was published in January of 1974. 32 pages, star date 3624.3, again, of course, in the 2260s. So we've got our cover, which is not quite as interesting, I don't think, as the previous issue, but still depicts 2 large plant-like kind of quasi-humanoids, one of which is shooting a laser beam out of its single eye, and someone who appears to be Kirk is returning fire with what looks to be a Cage-era phaser.
And a green-shirted McCoy jumping out of the way with a mysterious woman in a red jumpsuit running towards the viewer.
Yeah, dead towards the viewer, too. I mean, straight on. It's funny they got Kirk's shirt color right, but not McCoy's.
Yeah, that is weird. But again, this cover definitely has that old Pulp Fiction cover, and I'm not talking about the movie, kids, feel. You know, that painted quality, I mean, because it is painted. And again, I think it matches very well with the story. George Wilson, I think is a very fine artist. Even if this cover is maybe not as visually interesting as the previous one, I think it's still a pretty decent cover.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of other small things that we can talk about on this cover that I think are really interesting. That you can tell that these two monsters that we're looking at, although they do have humanoid features and they do have the musculature of people, if you look at the bottoms of their feet, they're obviously tree roots that have been uprooted out of the ground. And I was kind of taken aback by the fact that they have leaves covering up where their potential genitalia might be.
Yeah, you could just draw them not having genitalia. It's fine. Trees don't generally have human-like genitalia.
No, and yeah, that kind of struck me as odd. So are they supposed to be humanoids or are they supposed to be plants? I'm not quite sure. They are plants. We'll get into that. And where did these plants get these metal face masks from? Those are not natural. They don't occur in nature.
No. I think they found, one of those kind of rip-off Chinese cosplay stores, and they were looking for something kind of a little, Star Wars meets Battlestar Galactica, and that was the best that they could find there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of works. I definitely enjoy what they've done. They have metal plates on their chest here. They look really interesting. There is a little tagline here at the bottom, one little quick sentence, and I'll read it off. It says, "Trapped in Superspace, the Enterprise crew is relentlessly hunted by a terrifying war machine." Well, it looks like there's two war machines to me on the cover.
Yeah, well.
But they are terrifying.
Yeah.
I'll give them that.
I would not want to run into them in a dark alley.
No, for sure. And, well, if the proportions are to be taken correctly, they're at least twice the height, if not more, slightly than human, than Captain Kirk at least. And they're quite a bit more massive.
Yeah, and shoot laser beams out of their eyes.
Somehow,
so,
yes.
yeah, that's not something you want to run into.
Yeah, no, and they're Cyclopses, apparently. So that's kind of always scary. Cyclopses are always scary. So, any more thoughts on the cover before we dig into the issue?
No, let's get to it.
Okay, so as we always do, we're going to give you guys a little bit of a warning here that we're going to start talking about things that are spoiler in nature in a few seconds here. So if you want to stop and read the issue yourself and come back, feel free to do that, and we'll be here waiting for you.
Yeah, trust me, our disembodied voices will not mind you hitting pause on us.
No, not at all. But we probably won't even know you did it, to be honest. But
nope.
So, all right, everyone, we are going to start our discussion of the Siege in Superspace in 3, 2, 1. So once again, we have the teaser page when you first open the issue, and this one is, again, extremely similar to the cover art. So we only have one plant monster, though, in this one, as opposed to two. But the plant monster in this does look a heck of a lot like the ones on the cover, which is in my mind is a little bit different for Gold Key, because in many of the past issues, the painted covers were vastly different than the stuff you saw in the issue.
This monster thing even has the same pose as he does on the cover, just different hair, but again, it's the 70s. The colors for printing weren't as varied as we do have now with computers and everything, so I'll allow that, but it's a dead ringer.
Absolutely, and we still got our Cage-era looking phasers, although the one on the cover clearly looks a lot more like a Cage-era phaser than the ones in the teaser image, but still, they're pretty good. McCoy's shirt color is correct. It is blue. And we have a TOS woman in the foreground in the traditional red dress of a TOS-era female crew member, and an unnamed woman in the jumpsuit, which the jumpsuit on the cover was red. The one in the issue is more of a purple color, but clearly the same woman. She's got that long black hair, and she's running away from the plant creature. So
I think it's interesting that we don't see anyone's faces except for the monsters.
Yes, they're all facing the monsters coming towards us, and everyone is looking back at it. Even though the one woman is clearly trying to run away from it, she is twisted around and looking behind her at it as she runs. from the
Yeah,
creature.
I just thought that was an interesting composition choice.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out because I didn't really pick up on that until you just said it. You can kind of see McCoy's profile a little, but it's shaded. Everyone else is looking, and of course the TOS female crew member, it does not have any sort of weapon. She's just kind of standing there stunned looking.
Yeah, it looks like she's got a tricorder slung over her shoulder.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, it's kind of on the other side of her, so it definitely looks like a tricorder. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to find out that that's Uhura, but definitely doesn't look like her from behind. Once again, there's a text box here that's supposed to serve as a bit of a teaser before you get into the episode proper, or the issue proper, rather, and I'll read that out now. It says, "What strange and fantastic terrors lie beyond our own infinite universe? Captain Kirk and the crew of the Starship Enterprise uncover the darkest secrets of existence when they are trapped in the void called Superspace, and they encounter the most feared war machine ever created." Now that is ominous. Ever. Yes, so don't even come at me with some of your other fearsome war machines. Like the Doomsday Machine has nothing on this thing.
Nothing. It's all about Cyclops plant creatures.
Yeah, exactly. Never mind, the Doomsday Machine can consume entire planets at one time, but that's nothing.
Amateur hour.
Amateur hour. Are you any more to say about this teaser page before we move into the issue?
No, let's get on.
All right, so we are starting out with the first part of this issue, and it starts with a captain's log, like all good issues of Gold Key do. It says, Captain's Log, Stardate 3624.3, our destination is Draconis, a semi-civilized planet on the fringes of distant space. The Draconians seek admission to the Federation, which I love the fact that they included that, and we are to report on their present social and cultural conditions. So we're already starting out like a TOS episode. Awesome stuff. All right, so Mr. Spock is reporting there's a malfunction in something he calls the pressure gauge.
Right, because I'm sure there's only one on the ship.
On the entire ship, yeah. Now
the pressure gauge.
This could wind up affecting the life support systems, Kirk remarks, and Spock claims that will not take long to repair. However, the engines will need to be shut down in order to effect those repairs. He recommends placing the Enterprise in orbit around something to maintain its status in space while the engines are shut down so it doesn't kind of drift all over the place. So there is a neutron star by the name of, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Nyman, you think?
Let's run with that.
N-Y-N, Nyman. And it's 14 marks to the northwest. Northwest in space. Right. So Spock orders Scotty, by the way, to cut the power to the engines as they enter orbit around that neutron star. So as Scotty is making the repairs, he notices that there's yet another strained instrument problem, and they surmise that the star is radiating vast quantums of energy. Spock discovers that energy is overloading the computer systems, which is causing them to malfunction, and the energy is coming from a nearby black hole. So Kirk orders the Enterprise out of the black hole's range, but guess what? It's too late, and the ship is, quote, squeezed through a knot hole in the fabric of space, end quote, and disappears. So we're going to stop here because that's pretty significant. Couple of notes, Ian. One is very obvious, but before we get to the obvious one, the name Draconis stuck out to me. It sounded very, very familiar. And you know why it sounds familiar? Is because Sigma Draconis 4 is where Spock's brain was taken.
Ah, that's right.
It's where the Morg and the iMorg live. Now, I don't think that Sigma Draconis and Draconis are necessarily the same places, but no. I like the fact that that name Draconis was reused and got a little bit of a throwback to Spock's brain.
Yeah, and once again, still a way better name than, Planet ?
Yes, I have to agree. Yeah, let's hope we never get back to Planet ? Oh, here's something that I wanted to throw out to you that I thought was interesting. I deliberately skipped over this line while I was reading through that synopsis. On page 3, panel 2, after Spock tells Kirk that there's a problem with the pressure gauge, Kirk makes a remark that kind of struck me as very odd. He says that the Enterprise systems are programmed for self-repair. That has never been the case.
Never, yeah. I mean, it's a nice bit of forward thinking on the part of the writer, but it just doesn't fit in with what we've seen.
Not at all. And I don't think there's ever been any sort of implication.
You know who does do self-repair of systems? The Borg.
Yeah. Here we go with the Borg again. Yeah, so I thought it's nice that they included that. It makes it sound great. It's a cool line. It's a cool thought, but took me out of it a little bit. So that clearly is not something that's true in the Star Trek universe, at least not in this era.
But then, we get brought back in by that great drawing in panel 4 of a very Leonard Nimoy looking Spock.
Yes. A lot of the images of Spock in this comic are incredibly good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the one that you're talking about specifically, and it's excellent. Now, Shatner is a little off.
A little bit off, but, that's okay. He's kind of in the distance anyway, so you can kind of forgive it. I did think it was a little odd to just say, let's go into the orbit of a neighboring asteroid. Like, why not just come to a stop and work on your repairs there?
I guess maybe they were worried about drift. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, but space is big.
Yeah, but I mean, you never know if they could be kind of drifting around and something could be there and they could collide with it. Maybe, I don't know. Just kind of throwing ideas out there.
It is interesting they go to a neutron star.
It is.
That's a real thing.
Yes. Yeah, a little actual science there, which is cool. They brought that, but then again, they kind of ruin it by saying it's to the northwest.
Yeah, by 14 marks. Because there's only 4 cardinal directions in space.
Yes, the pattern indicates two-dimensional thinking. Yeah, is northwest really a direction in three-dimensional space? I guess if you're working on a 2D plane, you could say northwest.
Yeah, that one was a little weird. That was definitely the writer, as you say, indicating two-dimensional thinking.
Yeah, well, Star Trek as a whole, I've always thought that Star Trek doesn't really do a hell of a lot with the Z-axis.
No, and it's always weird how all the ships always are pointed, like they're righted in the same way, so that the tops of their ships are always matching the tops of the other ships.
Yeah, no one's ever on an angle pointing slightly up or down.
Yeah, like you remember that last episode of The Next Generation, All Good Things, when the Enterprise D of the future comes out and it's at this weird angle from below and you're like, whoa, it was so weird because that never happens in Star Trek.
No. Okay, so one other thing, and I'm sure you picked up on this too, and this to me was absolutely inexcusable. Spock asks Kirk if he's ever heard of a black hole, and Kirk says no. Come on, man.
Yeah, and I get why the writer did that. He had to do some, because black holes were still new in the public consciousness at the time, and so you had to have some sort of audience surrogate there for Spock to explain it to, but
Sure.
Pick someone besides Kirk, because he's encountered them on a couple of episodes in canon on Star Trek.
Yeah, they could have had some other crewman. But then again, I don't know how you could possibly go through Starfleet Academy and not know what a black hole is.
Right. I think a better way of handling it probably would have been, instead of just asking the captain, just kind of work the description of a black hole into the dialogue. And that way you avoid this whole problem altogether.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and that would be a very Spock-like thing to do, to describe a black hole without being asked to describe a black hole. He's always offering explanations for things.
Yeah, and it's a little weird that a neutron star is turning into a black hole. That's pretty rare because neutron stars are the remnants of supernova. He gets points for basically describing a black hole well, but then I feel like he only chose a neutron star for it because neutron star sounds cool.
Okay, I can definitely go with that. Anything else before we jump into the next part of this?
No, just that they're going into a black hole, kids, so get ready for a psychedelic experience.
They are, and let me tell you, that panel of them going into the black hole is pretty cool looking thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen a black hole drawn like that before. You have the vision of the swirly hole in space, but this is more, this almost looks like some sort of an aperture of a camera lens or something.
I was just thinking that, yes.
Maybe I'll take a screen grab and post it.
Maybe it's to represent an eye and you're going into, I don't know.
Yeah, or it looks like they're going into V'ger.
Yeah, almost.
It definitely
almost with all the planets and everything.
Yeah. So pretty cool. So all right, so moving on. Now this is going to be a bit of a long section here because there's a lot of backstory that shows up. But so the Enterprise amazingly passes through the black hole. We can debate that until our heads explode. But somehow they enter and exit a black hole, which I don't know if that's theoretically possible. I mean, well, theoretically it could be possible, but I don't know if it's really possible. I don't know. But anyway, it enters orbit around a large planet. So there's a planet beyond the black hole. Spock informs Kirk that he believes that they are in a place called, quote, Superspace, which is an all-encompassing entity which exists beyond their own infinite universe.
In other words, Mr. Spock, we could be anywhere.
Essentially, yeah, as Kirk says.
Yeah.
So Scotty and Spock begin making some repairs on the ship. Kirk, don't ask me why, Kirk decides to beam down to the planet's surface with McCoy and Uhura, which is an interesting away team.
Yeah, well, you know the Enterprise motto, safety third.
Safety, yes. Many of the primary officers go off the ship with inadequate security. So very much like TOS.
Yep.
So the landing party discovers there's some lush plant life. They look around and see a young woman in a purple uniform who we saw on the teaser page, who is fleeing from a huge creature that appears to be made of vegetation, and he's calling out for help. Kirk and McCoy attack the creature with their phasers. They fire and are finally able to topple the monsters. And again, we get the concept of the phasers weakening as we had in the prior issue.
Yeah.
Cool carryover, even though we have a different writer. So the woman says her name is Runa, and she is from a place called, this is a tough one, I don't know, what do you think, Ian? Samenon?
I went with Kimenon.
Got
like a hard C. It kind of felt Latin to me.
Okay, yep, I'm with you. Kimenon, I'm going to go with that too, which is a kingdom that exists beneath the world's surface, and we get the backstory of that city and her people who were forced to migrate down centuries ago. Again, they were a proud and mighty civilization that lived on the surface, but their scientists, lo and behold, created an ultimate defense weapon. Where have we heard this before?
Yeah, are you telling me they found a planet with a dying civilization? That's just unheard of in Gold Key.
Never happens. Ever happens. But you know, this time again, it's a weapon that they chose to create, the defense weapon that would ensure peace, but wound up not. The weapon was activated when alien invaders besieged the planet, and of course, like all machines do, it went out of control, indiscriminately destroying everything in sight. Life on the surface became extinct, and the machine shut itself down and hibernated, lying in wait for more things to kill. The monitors they had left recorded the landing of a Galactic Space Patrol vehicle, obviously not a Federation ship, but a Galactic Space Patrol. Think about that for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And the machine's sensors detected another human presence and reactivated itself. Now, that's a concept we need to talk about when we get done with this section. Another human
I was just thinking
space
that.
Control.
Yeah, it came up in the last issue, too.
Yeah, go figure. So the craft was destroyed. Apparently, it's one guy. The craft was destroyed, and the pilot had no hope of escaping the planet alive. So, fleeing from the machine, he discovered a nuclear reactor which once supplied the world's power. Pretty convenient, huh? Realizing that he was doomed, he set the energy controls far beyond the quote-unquote danger level and set off a nuclear holocaust. Is it a nuclear holocaust if there's no people around?
I don't know.
Killing both him and the machine. So they don't exactly know what happened immediately after that, but they suspected that the, quote, mind module, which controlled the machine, somehow survived this nuclear devastation. Since the mind module had been programmed for self-survival, It protected itself by genetically altering the vegetation in the area to create an army of vegetable creatures like the ones we encountered earlier. They didn't look anything like vegetables to me, but okay.
Vegetable creatures.
Yes, they sent up some expeditionary forces from Kamenon to the surface, hoping they could make it livable again, and Runa was, of course, among them. Their party was attacked by the plant creatures, and only Runa survived. So Runa, after the story, leads the party to a secret tunnel where they come across the magnificent city in a cavern. So meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, Spock and Scotty continue to work on the repair. Spock admits he doesn't know how they're going to be able to get the Enterprise back to their own universe. So here's our, not necessarily a ticking time bomb, but here's the dilemma of the Enterprise crew being potentially stuck in space somewhere else. So
in superspace.
In superspace where they can't escape. All right, so let's stop here. That was a lot to digest, and there's many things I think we need to discuss. So I like the fact that this Gold Key comic is giving us the author and the artist's interpretation of what being on the inside of a black hole looks like.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, kind of trippy. Yeah, there's some really iffy science in this one. Like, scientists say in a black hole, time and space are interchangeable. Well, they're already interchangeable outside of a black hole. It's the same thing. We call it space-time. It's just one thing. Einstein came up with that. I did find the name Superspace interesting.
Yes, I do like that.
Super is a prefix that's kind of the opposite of sub. Think about it, right? When you take a number and you move its baseline in a bit of text up a little bit so that it's hanging off kind of the top of the last letter, that's a superscript. And then if it's below the baseline, then it's a subscript. Mm-hmm. I kind of feel like it's the same thing. I kind of feel like superspace could be related somehow to subspace, just based on the name alone.
Yes, yep, definitely a good theory. So I get either could fit. Superspace does sound better, I guess, than subspace does. But at any rate, let's see, what else? I realize this is probably a side effect of the limited amount of colors they had in the inking process, but I still have to pose the question, why is Uhura white in this comic?
That's really weird.
Yeah, it's like they tried to draw her features, but her skin is the wrong color.
I feel it's like it's just the memo didn't get to the colorist.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, that story about, what was her name? Vina, Susan Oliver's character in The Cage, when she was an Orion dancer, and they kept sending the print over to, the color lab or whatever, and then they would get it back the next morning, and she came out and she was, just had white skin instead of the green that they had painstakingly and at great expense covered her in.
Yep.
And that just kept going around, and it was because nobody bothered to tell the lab that, no, she's supposed to be green. I feel like it's kind of a same, or at least similar thing here. I know that IDW just recently republished all of these Gold Key comics.
Yes.
And that they redid the colors on them, basically. Mm-hmm. And I would expect in those that they fix that issue.
I would hope so. I don't possess those, but I will definitely look that up and see if that's the case. Yeah, I have the old original scanned versions of these, so
newsprint and all.
Yeah, they're newsprint and all, and some of the inking is a little bit off on some of them. The line, they don't line up as well. But this is a Star Trek question, I guess, in general, because this happens so often in TOS, and it carries over into Gold Key. God bless him for carrying this over, but the ship is in need of repairs. It just went through a black hole. It's now orbiting an unknown planet, to their knowledge, no human being has ever seen before or set foot on. I can't understand why Kirk would take a landing party down to the planet solely on the premise that the planet can support life.
Right, and a very ill-advised landing party at that. The captain, the chief surgeon, and their communications officer.
It makes no sense whatsoever. No security detail whatsoever. I mean, I could totally see taking Spock down and a couple of security guards, but I just don't see what use McCoy and Uhura would have on that landing party, especially venturing into the complete and total unknown.
I mean, I get the idea of sending a landing party, right? It's a new, strange new world, and maybe it will have some clue as to how to get out of there. But it's just an ill-advised landing party.
It really is. Well, I know these comics are very short, and they probably don't have the time to get into running scans on the planet and, looking for life forms and finding the right place to beam to. So it's just hey, let's just go down and check it out. But definitely could have done some more research before going down there.
Yeah. I will say, though, at least now they're consistently beaming down to the planet instead of, for whatever reason, taking the Enterprise into the atmosphere and just flying really close to whatever they want to check out.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of a weird thing on the early issues.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Did you notice, too, that now that you've read a lot of these, that Gold Key is, regardless of who's writing them, they're really into giving lengthy alien race backstories?
Right. That's all just kind of in flashback mode. Yeah. It seems like it's every issue.
Yeah, and these comics are tragically short. I mean, there's not a lot of space, and they devote so much of it to giving these incredibly long, multiple page alien backstories. The last 2 issues are prime examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
They could have devoted more time and issue space to the adventures at hand or the wrap-ups, because sometimes the wrap-ups are so quick because they just don't have any space left.
Right. It's kind of like George Lucas wrote them.
We went there.
Deep cut.
Oh,
deep
man,
cut.
we went there. That's dangerous ground. Well, it's a Star Trek podcast, so I think we're okay.
No, I mean, I love it, but it's just, that was... Here, I'll tell you what. Remove the cut against George Lucas. It's kind of like Frank Miller wrote it.
Oh, all right.
Right? Because that was kind of the problem that Frank Miller had with the Dark Knight Returns sequel that he did, was that he just spent so much time in the front of the story that by the time it came time to resolve it, it was just rushed. Yeah. It was like he just ran out of space.
Yep. And that's unfortunate with these comics. I mean, there's only so long that they can be, especially these earlier ones where, it had to be 32 pages. That was pretty much all you got.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, here's the big handoff. I know you were dying to talk about vegetable creatures, so go for it.
Vegetable creatures. Oh my God. It cracks me up every single time they say it. They say it all the time. It's like vegetable creatures or vegetable men. And it's just, it's so good. Just ridiculous. You could call them anything else, but no, they went with vegetable creatures.
Vegetable creatures. And, it actually just bears pointing out really quickly, this is not the first time in Star Trek we've seen plant-based creatures. So I'm thinking back to Shore Leave.
Right. And in fact, the very first Gold Key issue was about that. And I kind of feel like, because by now the writing has improved so significantly, as has the art, this issue to me really felt like what issue 1 should have been.
Good point. I like that thought, because the first one they had Janice Rand in it, and she got captured by the carnivorous plant creatures, right?
Right.
Yeah. It was anything else you want to say before we move on to part 3?
Well, a few things.
Okay, go for it.
I really liked the underground city.
Yes.
When we finally get to it on, what is that, page 12?
Yeah, it's awesome.
I thought that looked really cool. And with that little shuttle flying out of the portal on the side, the buildings, they remind me a lot of that, kind of late 60s, early 70s aesthetic. Like you would even see that in real life, airports and stuff like that. But it immediately reminded me of the Jetsons.
Yeah, it's that quasi-futuristic design of the time, what they thought the future would look like, right?
Right. That sort of paleo-future look. And I love that look. And so the fact that the city looked like that was just...
Yes, I agree. I liked it. And unfortunately, due to the limitations in the amount of colors they could use, it is very monotone color-wise.
Right.
It's gold, white, and like a pale blue. But that doesn't detract too much from the actual art itself. It's very, very detailed for a backdrop that's kind of only has one line of dialogue over top of it.
Right. And what's cool is that as the issue goes on, you just see it a lot in the backgrounds, and it's so cool looking that like it was a great choice to go with that design.
I agree. It fits very well.
Yeah, and just the atmosphere that it adds to the comic works really well. Another thing I gotta say, I love all the sound effects in this little stretch here. We've got Dragoon as the weapon was activated when the alien invaders besieged our planet, or Parum as the humans' craft gets destroyed. And let's touch on that, because it seems like sometimes in Gold Key, the writers forget that these are aliens.
Yes.
Or at least they're supposed to be aliens out there, right? Like, why were the mummies in the last issue programmed to assimilate humans? Like that's what Spock said anyway. And in this case, it was the machine sensors detected another human presence.
Yep.
A, implying that the natives of this planet are human, and B, that the visitor was a human.
That, to me, the fact that the visitor was a human is far more intriguing to me than the citizens of the actual planet itself being human, because the implication that there is a, what did they call it? The
Galactic Space Patrol.
Space Patrol, yes. That implies that it is not part of the Federation. So this lone guy was patrolling inside superspace, inside the black hole. Was he traveling freely in and out of the black hole, or is that Space Patrol exists solely in superspace?
Or maybe there was an Earth in superspace that spawned humans.
Oh boy.
And then instead of a federation, they formed a galactic space patrol.
Here's a rabbit hole. That's a good theory, though, because they don't go into a heck of a lot of detail about exactly what superspace is. We get a little blurb about it, and then the rest of us left to our imagination. So it could be anything in there. Could it have been a doorway into another universe like the Mirror Universe?
Yeah, there's so many things it could have been.
Yeah, I guess maybe it remains to be seen if we get Superspace making a comeback in any Gold Keys. I doubt it.
Yeah,
you never know. So anything else on your list before we move on?
Well, just that was awfully foreshadowing with the bracelet there.
It was.
Pay attention to that, readers.
Yes, keep your eye on that.
And beyond that, let's go. Let's explore the city of Kimanon.
Okay, so Runa introduces the landing party to a man by the name of Anthar, who is the governor, who has an extremely cool outfit on. He almost looks like a Gregorian monk or something, with a long beard, not quite wizard-like, but definitely monkish in appearance. So Anthar, of course, welcomes them and asks Kirk about how they arrived on the planet and how they managed to survive the attack from the giant plant creatures. Kirk tells Anthar about the Enterprise being drawn through the black hole and shows him his phaser. And just at that moment, poor Anthar is struck by an energy beam and pretty much immediately killed. The group turns around to see who fired the beam, and it is one of the huge plant creatures has found its way into the city, and it begins to destroy the city dwellers, just killing them indiscriminately left and right. Even though they try to fight back, it's no use. Kirk asks Runa if there's anything that can be used against the creatures, and she tells him about some energy pools that are along the outskirts of the city that they use to draw their power from, and they could possibly draw the creatures near those pools and maybe set off some sort of a reaction that would kill them. So she and Kirk run off towards the pools, luring some of the creatures to follow them. They enter a pretty cool looking scene here where they're leaping from rock to rock across these watery pools, but the creatures appear to be too intelligent to fall for this trick and stop at the edge and refuse to follow them across into the pool. So one of the creatures fires a beam that starts a kind of a cave-in rock slide type scenario, and Kirk and Runa barely escape with their lives. And they realize the only way to eliminate these creatures is to find the device that is controlling them. So meanwhile, The Doctor and Lieutenant Uhura continue to fight the creatures along with the citizens of the mystical underground city. Uhura is thrown off her balance by by an energy blast and twists her ankle. The plant creature approaches in an attempt to kill her. McCoy saves her life in the nick of time with a very heroic phaser maneuver. Runa leads Kirk to an old warehouse where there's weapons stored. After they had been outlawed in the city, they kind of stored all the weapons in one big place. Kirk uses his phaser to blast open the door, and inside there's all manner of weapons, swords, what have you, laser beams, whatever you want. It's all in there. At that moment, Spock calls down to Kirk from the Enterprise to tell him that a nearby star is about to go nova, which can generate enough energy, they surmise, to send the Enterprise home. And we'll talk about the science behind that. Just then, several of the plant creatures break into the warehouse. Kirk manages to kill one of them with a sword, which is interesting, and Runa fires some sort of a laser rifle at the other. Kirk notices that the closer the plant creatures get to Runa, the more her bracelet begins to glow. So let's stop there. Ian, I'm sure you have plenty of stuff to talk about for this one.
Oh my goodness, so much. First of all, boy, that is not a great moment for Uhura.
No.
Why does she have to twist her ankle? That's just, come on. For someone like Uhura, even.
Yeah, it's not random female crew member X, right? It's
right.
Uhura. Looking at what we get today in the new Kelvin timeline movies.
Yeah, it just left a sour taste in my mouth, that little sequence there. It was just, there were so many other things they could have done. Just don't do that. I twisted my ankle, I can't get up.
Yeah, it's a wasted opportunity. It's a shame. It's just not a great way to treat the iconic female character.
But what they do get right on a TOS level is here's where we get to the sort of social commentary. You've got this underground civilization who have banned weapons because their civilization was almost destroyed by weapons. So they were like, well, let's get rid of them. But then, interestingly, rather than destroy them, they put them all in a room. So that's, I don't know, that's interesting. It's like they didn't quite want to get rid of them completely.
Yeah, they might need them someday.
Right, and yet it's still, when that day comes, it's a distasteful choice to them.
They're hesitant to use them, but they have no choice.
And then I also thought it was funny, Kirk's got a phaser, which seems to be the thing that is effective against these, I'm going to say it, vegetable men. And yet, what's the weapon that he grabs from this vault? A sword?
Yes.
I mean, that's a little weird.
Yeah, it was a very strange choice. And the panel in which he uses the sword, the plant creature or vegetable man that he kills, seems to be on the smallish side. It doesn't appear to be this big, towering, hulking, menacing thing. It almost appears to be about his size, or maybe a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
So maybe they come in different shapes and sizes.
It's like about the size of someone with gigantism.
Yes. Yeah. On page 16, panel number 3, we have our obligatory religious reference where Kirk tells Spock to pray.
Oh, yeah. Which is a especially weird thing to say to Spock.
Yeah.
That was weird. But the gist of what he's getting at, I could accept. But yeah, the wording was a little weird. It just seemed out of character. For someone who knows Spock, that's not what you would tell him.
No.
I would be like, the best you can do is try to figure out a way out of this, Mr. Science Officer.
Exactly. How about you beam us the heck out of here?
Right. So they foreshadow also throughout this whole sequence. Kirk notices as they're jumping across that little pool that the bracelet that had been foreshadowed earlier is glowing. And the closer they get to this, I forget, is it towards the arsenal room or is it towards the vegetable men that it glows brighter?
Yes, the closer that the creatures get, the more the thing glows.
That's right. Yeah, and Kirk keeps noticing that all throughout this sequence. And I thought that was a really nice sort of subtle way of kind of having Kirk piece together this puzzle.
Yeah, and it's usually, again, he's almost playing the Spock role in figuring out the puzzle. So, Kirk does, do it occasionally in TOS as well, so it's not as far-fetched to have Kirk figure things out. But I would like to see Spock get the chance to be Spock for a change.
Sure. I mean, at least they're getting the character of Spock a lot closer. But yeah, that sword though.
Peculiar choice, especially with all the rifles and other more appropriate weaponry that was available.
Although, I will say this, it does speak to Kirk's fondness for antiques.
Good call.
Which I'm sure is not what was in the mind of the writer when he was laying this down, and yet here we are.
Yes. Well, I guess it also makes for a unique moment where we see Kirk actually using a bladed weapon as opposed to, his usual choice of a phaser or his own fists, as the case usually is. But it was a weird choice, but I still kind of enjoyed it. I mean, maybe he was just feeling a little more brutal and he wanted to get a little more close quarters action.
Could be.
Anything else you got before we move on?
No, let's get going.
Okay. Yeah, this is the conclusion. This is our fourth part of the story. So Kirk tells Runa to take the bracelet off, and then he shoots it with his phaser. The plant creatures that are attacking the city immediately freeze in place and are paralyzed. Kirk explains that the device was relaying their every move and telling the plant creatures exactly where they were and what they were doing. So they were drawn to that device. So Kirk says to Rona that her people have nothing more to fear, and now that they know where the mind module has been hiding, they have an idea of how they can make use of it. So he orders Spock to beam them back to the Enterprise. Runa wishes them a good voyage and says goodbye and wishes she could offer more than just thanks as they beam back up. Mr. Spock tells the captain that the star is very close to exploding, and he's questioning whether or not the energy generated by the nova will be sufficient to return to our own universe. So Kirk orders Spock to fire up the crippled mind module into the star, which is an interesting choice. How they shoot a small piece of jewelry out of the ship into the star. I thought it would have been interesting if they beamed it into it or something, but Kirk says the extra energy from that act should speed up the gravitational collapse of the star. So the Enterprise fires the mind module into the star and it explodes violently. The ship is thrown into a void where time and space intermingle. Then they arrive back in their own universe miraculously, and Spock exclaims, "We succeeded, Captain!" with an exclamation point. So an emotional Spock there. Once more, we've crossed the barriers of superspace, is a direct quote. So the Enterprise continues on with their mission, setting a course for Draconis, and we get the Kirk moment where he's reminiscing on Rona being quite the woman, and if only infinity didn't block their paths. So if only. So we get a final captain's log, stardate 3525.2, to wrap this up safely in our own era. We continue our trek to Draconis. In spite of everything, I don't think I will ever forget being trapped in that void called superspace. And thus ends the issue. And we had to get that Kirk romance moment in there, didn't we? Had to.
It's just,
But, they've been conspicuously absent from Gold.
It was very Kirk.
Yeah.
But it's also like, you didn't get any sense of that at all from the rest of the comic. So it was weird for him to have that thought at the end.
Yeah, no emotional moments at all. But they had to throw it in there. I guess I'm imagining the author has a little bit more knowledge of Star Trek and knows about Captain Kirk's swagger. Felt like he had to throw it in there.
Yeah, like the only thing that he knew about her was that her fiance had just recently died.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like, come on, Kirk. Come on.
That's a typical Kirk move. Typical Kirk.
Yeah.
So they got his character.
Classic Kirk.
Classic Kirk. But this issue, once again, like the previous issue, feels like a TOS episode to me.
Yeah.
Now, the effects probably could not have been achieved on the show at the time, but
no,
it felt like a very good self-contained storyline that really fit into, some of the things we've seen in the original series. It could totally have been an episode.
This one, especially when you add the effects in and everything, this one I think really felt, I'm going to say it, like an animated series episode.
Yes. Good call. Good call. They totally could have done this on the animated series.
Although it probably looked a little better in the comic form. I got to say, on page 23, that last panel there.
I had that in my notes.
That's
too.
a really good likeness of Nichelle Nichols.
Yeah, minus the skin tone.
Minus that, of course.
That smile is so bizarre. It's so. I had it in my notes. It's weird. It looks good, but it's weird.
It is, but it looks like her, and that's probably the most, at least out of the issues that I've read so far, that Uhura has actually looked like Uhura.
Yeah, we need to find out if the IDW republish fixes the color issue.
Yeah. If you want to, any of you fans out there listening, if you have it, let us know. Just tweet us at TTT_pod on Twitter, and we're dying to know.
Yes, we definitely are. Page 25 has a really awesome explosion, by the way. I don't want to lose that note. So
yeah.
Really, really cool artwork there.
Yeah, it almost makes up for the really janky-looking Enterprise in the previous panel.
Again with the janky Enterprise. Alberto, what are you doing?
Yeah, he's not consistent, it seems, anymore. Like, because earlier in this issue, the Enterprise looked good, and then as the sort of went on, I wonder if it was like a deadline thing.
That could be.
And that he just had less time, and he was like, well, okay, I know how it's supposed to be, like, kind of shaved. I'll just, crank it out. And especially on this issue where there's a lot of details. I mean, like, all the faces and everything are really good. There's a lot of figures that he had to draw. That's going to be time consuming. There's that city that's in the background of almost every shot.
Yeah,
that pool is really detailed. The vegetable men. Yeah, there's a lot going on in here, and I could see it being that he just didn't have time for those last shots, that he was probably saving those because those were the things that, well, I know what the Enterprise looks like, whereas the other things he would have had to kind of sit there and think about, well, what is this underground city going to look like? What are these vegetable men going to look like? Which, they don't look that bad.
No.
I got to say. No. It's just that whereas earlier in this issue, he got it to look really good. These last shots of the Enterprise don't look as good.
No, they are very inconsistent.
Yeah.
That is for sure. I like the panel of Rona and Kirk jumping across the rocks in the water. I love the position that Kirk is in. It really felt like an action shot to me. Like I felt like he was actually jumping from stone to stone. So great choice on that frame.
And with sort of uncertain footing as well.
Yes. Very, very well done. I thought that captured that moment perfectly. And anything else you want to talk about, wrap up with this comic before we get into our essential?
Well, it's the solution that he ends up coming up with to just destroy the thing. It's a little weird, right? Because he destroys it, and that's how they defeat the vegetable men. But then it's still around later?
Yeah, I kind
for them to throw into the Nova?
Get that. I thought that the implication was that when he shot it with the phaser, it destroyed it. But I didn't really get how it had anything left inside of it energy-wise that would have, I mean, how would that thing have effect? I mean, wouldn't that thing have just burned up inside?
Yeah, or just been inert.
Melted? Yeah, completely. I don't see how.
I mean, maybe it's a super space thing, but
maybe, but there was no implication anywhere in the comic that thing contained some huge amount of power within it.
Yeah, and if it had power, why wouldn't that have been powering the vegetable men more?
And why would that thing not have exploded violently when Kirk shot it with the phaser if it had that kind of power? I mean, you would think if you shoot it into a nova, which is extremely hot, and it explodes, wouldn't shooting it with a phaser, which is probably pretty hot, also cause it to explode?
Yeah, it was just it was a weird choice, and I feel like it could have been avoided if, rather than Kirk shooting it, he had, I don't know, tinkered with it and turned it off somehow.
Yeah, or stomped on it or something.
Something, because it seemed a little disjointed to me and not very well explained.
No, and there again is another moment where Spock could have come in really handy. It would have been It
Oh,
would have been
totally.
totally believable if Spock looked at it and figured out how to turn it off, right?
Yeah.
That would have been a perfect moment for Spock.
Yeah. A little note here, though. So you look on, what is this, page 24, panel 3, you see the transporter room. And this is the first time that I can remember, it might have even been earlier in the issue when they were transporting down, but I don't remember. But this shot in particular, this is really starting to look like the transporter room from the original series. And that's sort of the first time in Gold Key, because at first, remember they even had that sort of plastic wall with the door in the early issues, and everything looked very, very Buck Rogers-y.
Yep.
But now, like, the control console looks closer, the walls for sure, and the transporter pad for sure. It looks a lot like the transporter room.
It does. And that, I guess we can attribute that probably to there being more production or set shots available for them to base these things on. So it's almost, I mean, besides the position of the control console for the transporter being in the wrong place, it looks much, much, much more like the actual transporter room from the ship. So yeah, good observation there. I couldn't remember if this was the first time we'd seen it look that close or not, but you could very well be right on that.
Yeah, it's the first time that I ever noticed, at least.
But it's nice. We'll have to keep our eyes open in subsequent issues and see if it stays consistent, because the transporter room has looked very different between different issues. From the early ones where it looked, as you said, Buck Rogers-y, then it would get a little more sparse, where it would look like kind of almost like they're standing inside of an oblong sphere or oval shaped thing. It was it's been very, very strange, and I always thought it was very funny that the outside of the ship always looked right, or for the most part right, but the inside didn't look right and kept changing.
Although I don't think they refer to the device is, but I remember early on they would never call it a transporter.
No,
it was always a teleporter.
Yep.
Or a teleportation device, or it was always teleporting, not transporting. And I wonder if the writers have caught on to that. I don't think they referenced the device at all in this one, though.
They just say beam us back to the Enterprise, so at least they have beam right.
Well, I'm sure by then that had become sort of the pop culture
beam me up, Scotty
juggernaut of a phrase that it still is today.
Still is
by then.
T-shirts and buttons and
a 5-year mission song.
And a 5-year mission song. So, Ian, do you want to give us your non-canon essential vote for this issue?
Yeah, so I'm going to rate this one essential, but with a caveat.
Oh, okay.
And the caveat is related to what I was saying earlier. This felt like what issue 1 should have been. Mm-hmm. And so it's essential if you replace issue 1 with this.
I like that. It's good. I'm probably, by my own rule set, I'm going to have to go non-essential on this myself. So it's a fun ride for sure. I like that a lot of the characters are present. Not all of them, but I liked a lot of them are present. There's nothing, I don't think, that's introduced here. Well, actually, Superspace, the concept of Superspace is interesting. But I don't know if it's something that recurs again. I'm not sure if it's really that solid a concept in the universe of Trek. I'm not really sure how I stand on it, but I don't think it's enough to kick this into essential territory for me. So I'm probably going to have to stick with the non-essential for the time being, at least. So we will disagree.
That's fair.
But that's how things go around here. So
yeah.
As always, we are on the tricordertransmissions.com. If you're looking for us, on facebook.com/the tricordertransmissions, TTT_pod. We have some merchandise up on Redbubble.
And I gotta say, that's at redbubble.com. Search for Tricorder Transmissions. There's some t-shirts on there, and I gotta say, Redbubble, they don't phone it in on the t-shirts. These are really, really good quality. We're not talking cafe press where, you're not going to have a really good fit and, they'll shrink the first time you put them through the wash. These fit well. They're really light and airy. The colors come out really well on them. I think you'll like these.
Yeah, and you can pick multiple styles of t-shirts as well. So you're not just stuck with, a classic t-shirt. You can also get one more athletic fit. You can get women's specific t-shirts there. It's really great that they give you a lot of different choices. I like the classic shirt, but I know some of the other guys like the more, the little more expensive, lighter fabric that kind of feels almost like pajamas. I think Andy Fark was saying it feels like pajamas. So it's great. There's a lot of options there, and I gotta give a shout out to my buddy Ken Mills, who I'm part of another podcast with him for the last couple of years about the monkeys called Zilch, a Monkeys podcast, and he turned me on to Redbubble. He's an artist, a graphic artist by trade, and he sells a lot of his work through Redbubble. And he told me about them, and they're a really great site. So as Ian was saying, all the products that we've gotten from them have been solid. So definitely a good place to go to buy merchandise. Not just our stuff, but there's tons of artists on there that sell their wares. So Ian, where can people find you again?
Oh, well, you can find me most often on Twitter at Ian128K. If you want to follow along my comic that I'm working on, it's at In the Starfleet. You can watch, I'll release as I'm doing updates on it, getting it ready for launch. I'll be doing production notes and, occasional snippets of in-progress artwork and that sort of thing. I'm on Facebook as well, but I'm not that active on it. But if you want to add me anyway, I'm facebook.com/Ian J. Adams. And back to you.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. We've had a heck of a lot of fun talking about this issue of Gold Key, and we'd love to hear your feedback on it. So jump on social media, Facebook or Twitter, shoot us a note or leave us a review on iTunes. We would love to hear what you have to say about our show, and we look forward to talking to you. And we will see you again next week with another episode of Tricorder Transmissions. Hi there, thanks again for listening. If you're cruising the galaxy looking for even more Trek talk, why not visit our good friends Bill and Dan over at TrekGeeks.com? They've got a great podcast that covers a wide range of Star Trek topics, so you're sure to find something you'll love. And if you're in the mood for some awesome tunes, then you really need to head over to 5yearmission.net. The guys are writing a song for every episode of the original series, and each one is absolutely brilliant. So that's TrekGeeks.com and 5yearmission.net. Check them out today.